I don't agree, and here's why. We should hear this a lot more in health and safety practice. The need to say these words and the way it sounds when we say it is more important to our effectiveness than you can imagine. Hey, it's Andrew, and this is Safety on Tap. Since you're listening in, you must be a leader wanting to grow yourself and drastically improve health and safety along the way. Welcome to you. You're in the right place. If this is your first time listening in, thanks for joining us, and well done for trying something different to improve. And of course, welcome back to all of you wonderful regular listeners. In year one, my school report said that I participated with vigour in everything. I was creative and imaginative, but easily distracted. In year two, I was described as enthusiastic, with much to contribute, but restless and tended to distract other students. In year three, Mrs. Noonan lauded my vivid imagination, my pleasing progress, but said straight out I was inconsiderate of others. In year four, I managed to earn the teacher's label as polite, interested, capable, but lacking concentration and easily distracted. For the first time, it seems, Miss Newcombe made the connection between my apparent weaknesses and my strengths, recognising my participation in group work and class discussions as extremely good. And by year six, poor Miss Rodgers, who was 1 year out of Teachers College and didn't know what hit her. Hardworking, creative and capable was what she said I was. And then came the shit sandwich of feedback. Great participation in discussions, but the enthusiasm leads to rather thoughtless actions, which can be disruptive, and this does hinder Andrew producing work that he is capable of. The biggest problem with communication is the assumption that it has happened. And the number one cause of conflict is when people fail to understand each other. If I said to you that we don't have enough disagreement in health and safety, what would you say to me? Does that conjure up all the times that you've had to go up against a worker or a supervisor or a manager on a hazard or an inadequate risk control? Or when you've gone head to head with an auditor or a client or an inspector? How many times have you had to defend a safety requirement because it's a requirement, or the system says, or infamously, it's a legal requirement, which we say with such conviction that it's become almost automatic, even though deep down we know that most things we label as legal requirements are not. Okay, so we probably have enough disagreements. So what if I tweaked my statement or my question to you? What if I said that we don't have enough good quality disagreements in health and safety? What comes to mind? What does that mean? In year 10, I studied modern history with Mr. Martinez and only 7 other kids. In early high school, we had been forced to have a taste of all of the different subjects like geography. But by year 10, we had to select elective subjects, which meant that the kids in the class were more likely to be there by choice and that we should have made the teacher's life easier as well. Mr. Martinez was a passionate and rather unassuming guy, and a rowdy class would take over pretty quickly for him. In year 10, modern history, one of the things that I loved was that we would move the tables around into a circle. Some people were sitting on the tables, others with their feet on the chairs, some sitting on the windowsills. And we would have the most interesting and free-flowing dialogues about whatever we were learning. It was probably one of my first tastes of what work and learning could be like if the conditions were right and the need for control was loosened by the person in charge. Richard and I were arguably 2 of the smarter kids in the room, which naturally created a bit of competition between us. And truth be told, Richard was a whole lot book smarter than me, but I kind of had a real life scrappiness, which meant that we were worthy adversaries. So ironically, I probably would have earned the name Dick more than he would have being an actual Richard. Richard was from an Italian family, and like lots of post-war immigrant families in Australia, it seemed that their cultural heritage only got stronger as it passed from generation to generation, albeit somewhat kind of locked in the 1950s view of the world. He was all about the virtues of Southern Italian food, of football, the round ball kind. Don't ever use the word soccer, it's blasphemy. And a deep connection with all things Italian, their Catholicism and their location in the Mediterranean and their skin colour, or everything. In modern history, we spent a few semesters looking at the rise and fall of different kinds of empires, and we were given the latitude to explore much further than the topic or the assignment or the curriculum needed us to. And it was natural that we talked about the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire. And I'd watched this video on our Microsoft Encarta CD. I don't know whether any of you remember that. And I had noticed in this video, this very averagely produced video, that there was a time in the Middle Ages when the Holy Roman Empire was led by a Frankish king called Charlemagne. And the Franks were, or most of the Franks were in what we call modern day Germany. And they actually invaded the old Roman Empire after its decline to create what they called the Holy Roman Empire. So with enough information to be dangerous, but far less than being well informed, I walked into modern history class one day and I took Richard to task and I said that the Roman Empire really fundamentally started in Germany and that the Italians didn't really have much right to claim being the OG Roman Empire. And there was no doubt that I was walking in there trying to bait Richard into a fight, into a debate. And it might have gone on for the whole lesson. Richard and I going back and forth with the rest of the class kind of listening in like spectators, and Mr. Martinez holding back, neither kind of directing or intervening in our impromptu debate. And it was crazy and loud and fascinating. And looking back, I was really a shit. I knew that I wouldn't ever win an argument I was trying to make because I was factually wrong and deliberately provoking. But I was curious to see how Richard would respond and to have fun debating a point that I didn't really believe in. We learned heaps and we got better at constructing a point of view. We made the topic exciting and interesting, and we tried something that was risky, something that we started and we didn't know where it would go. I was with a health and safety team I coach a little while ago, and on this team get together, my job was to facilitate some critical reflection on the role and the effectiveness of the team. So we used a concept from Patrick Lencioni called the 5 dysfunctions of a team to guide our dialogue. Lencioni labels one of these 5 dysfunctions as the fear of conflict. And this is one area where a lot of people get confused, quite rightly. He describes what he means by this, saying that productive conflict builds trust, and the absence of which is the absence of trust is the foundational dysfunction of a team in his model. But fear of conflict wastes energy by people maintaining a nice but fake kind of harmony and obscures relevant information from the people who need to hear it. I think he could have chosen his language better, especially given how aligned and familiar people are these days with Amy Edmondson and colleagues' work on psychological safety and how that relates to interpersonal trust. I prefer the language that I learned from John MacDonald in episode 106 of the Safety on Tap podcast. And John explains that the word conflict comes from the word conflictus, originally referring to the clashing of swords. Conflict is fundamentally a battle of aggression and violence, you against me, from which there will be a winner and a loser, and the loser will get hurt. The reason why we fear conflict is because our lizard brain tells us that serious conflict might end up in our death or serious harm. For most of us these days, that is nonsense. But our fear of conflict is still cognitively very real. Instead of conflict, John MacDonald suggests that we try out the word dispute instead. The word dispute comes from the word disputare in 2 parts. Dis meaning apart, and putare meaning to reckon or to work out or work through. So if conflict is inherently negative, and I think quite right to be feared, a dispute is merely a difference of understanding, which is in the process of being worked out. The word dispute inherently recognises that there is a difference. There's not a judgment about right or wrong, winner or loser. It's just different. Dispute also inherently commits people who are involved to understand each other and to work it out together. It's inherent in the definition. And interestingly, people can be involved in a dispute that has disagreement and they do not need to agree on everything and can still come out to resolve an understanding between each other. My experience would suggest that health and safety people find themselves in conflict, or we create conflict, more than is necessary or helpful for anyone. If the mode of operating is that you know the answer, you claim to be correct, and you tell people what the problem is and what needs to happen, all of that might be true, but you're inviting conflict. So let's turn that idea inwards, internally within ourselves, as individual practitioners and within our functional teams. Hey, it's Andrew with a quick reflection about performance. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, I wish I had a coach for work. So it's pretty normal that coaching isn't a concept that's on your mind. What I do know is, from working with hundreds of health and safety professionals, what's more likely to be in your mind are the frustrations you might be feeling about making change, or the doubts you have about your ability to step up, or concerns you have about the capability of your team to better service the needs of your organization. Or maybe you're excited but unsure about your new promotion, that expanded responsibility, or how in the heck you'll develop and deliver that new health and safety strategy. These are the everyday things in the game of health and safety practice. Some good, some not so good. A coach is not on the field of play with you. They don't pass you the ball and tell you what to do. A coach helps you be ready for the game, to prepare a plan, to develop the skills or the capabilities for the next challenge, and support you through the losses as well as the wins. Coaching is not evaluated on your participation or the time spent. Coaching is only evaluated on its outcomes for you, and they can be pretty awesome. Coaching is one of the most effective forms of professional development I've ever seen. I have a long list of stories and people who I can put you in touch with to tell you exactly how they've benefited from coaching with me. And it's a pretty smart investment in valuable resources for you and your team. If you want to explore how coaching might help accelerate you and your team's success, visit www.safetyontap.com/curious. Back to this health and safety team I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team from Patrick Lencioni. As leaders and professionals, we wrestled with the benefits and the challenges of disputing or disagreeing more and better. We need to work out ways to get valuable input to the things that we want to create or change. We often request feedback from people when we create things or change things, and we get little or nothing back. And we so often mistakenly believe that that endorses or validates the thing that we're working on. That couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, that's kind of dangerous. In this team I was working with, members of the team often won't provide feedback about the very health and safety processes that they will be implementing and assuring. And this creates an uncomfortable situation for the team. If everyone agrees or no one disagrees, then, to butcher a phrase from someone else, then all of them are arguably redundant in the process of change. Part of our job is to deliberately and persistently seek out disputes and disagreements, and by doing so, engage in the process of resolving and understanding amongst the people involved. This is hard work. It feels scary, but it's the only way that we can hand on heart say that we consulted and that we have a process or a control measure or whatever it is, that we are as confident as possible will do what we think it should do to make health and safety better. Kim Scott wrote a book called Radical Candor, and if you don't read the book, that's okay. You'll get the gist of the message pretty quickly. She talks about this fear that we have of communicating differences of opinion or our understanding directly and the problems that result when we don't. She has this 4-quadrant model like a Johari window. On the vertical axis, at the top end is care, and at the bottom end is kind of being negative or rude or having harmful intent, the lack of care. The horizontal axis is how much we say. So on the left-hand side is staying silent, and on the right-hand side is communicating directly. So let's have a look at the 4 quadrants of the model. The bottom left is challenging directly but without care, and Scott labels this as obnoxious aggression or front stabbing. Bottom left is communicating without care but staying silent, and she calls this manipulative insincerity. We watch people walk into problems that we can foresee. That's manipulative insincerity. Moving to the top left, staying silent but with care is called ruinous empathy. This challenges directly the old saying that if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything. I think we get confused by this, thinking that direct feedback isn't nice, so we say nothing. In Lencioni's language, he'd say that this is trying to keep things in harmony. That leaves the top right, challenge directly and with care. And that is what Kim Scott calls radical candor. More and more health and safety practitioners are talking about safety clutter, and very few are actually doing anything substantive about it. One of the reasons why it's difficult to tackle safety clutter is that we are not in the habit and the practice of disagreeing with each other. The most resistance to decluttering comes from us, from health and safety people, not the people doing the work or even management. I've scratched my head about this for years and worked with lots of clients in coaching who are wrestling with this challenge. Many of us are missing the skill and the practice, or at least are pretty rusty at disagreeing with each other. We need to disagree more, and we need to disagree better. I was labelled disruptive at school because I sought out conflict, and I often did it without much care for others. I am not suggesting that you should be like Andrew Barrett in primary school or in Year 10 modern history. You shouldn't. What I have learned is that disagreeing leads to enormous gains in terms of learning, of personal growth, and in stronger relationships. When you disagree better, it helps us build the muscle of critically evaluating our world and of defending what we put into the world. We can make things better by making better things. We need to disagree more, and we need to disagree better. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, what's the one thing you'll do to take positive, effective, or rewarding action to grow yourself and drastically improve health and safety along the way? See ya.